My daughter suddenly stopped speaking to me with no explanation. Years later, a letter revealed a misunderstanding fueled by outside lies. We slowly rebuilt trust and healed old wounds. The day the letter finally arrived, my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it into the sink full of soapy water. It had been 7 years since my daughter last spoke my name out loud. The envelope was thin, cream-colored, my address written in a careful, familiar slant I would recognize anywhere. For a long moment, I just stared at it, listening to the steady drip of the faucet and the low hum of the refrigerator behind me. My heart felt like it was trying to remember a rhythm it had forgotten how to keep. I dried my hands on a dish towel and sat at the small kitchen table where she used to do her homework, her pencil tapping nervously against the wood whenever she got stuck on a math problem. The chair across from me was empty now, pushed in neatly, untouched for years. I ran my thumb along the edge of the envelope, afraid that opening it might somehow undo whatever fragile piece I'd learned to live with. Before everything broke, my life was simple in the best way. I worked as a building inspector for the city. Nothing glamorous, but steady. Mornings smelled like coffee and toast. Evenings usually meant leftovers reheated in the microwave and a quiet television murmuring in the background. My wife, Ellen, had passed away when our daughter, Claire, was 17. Cancer doesn't care how careful or kind a person is. It just takes and leaves you to rearrange the pieces. Claire and I learned how to survive together after that. We became a strange little team, burning dinners, laughing at our mistakes, figuring out how to be 2 instead of 3. She had Ellen's eyes and my stubborn streak. On Sundays, we'd walk to the farmer's market, sharing one cinnamon roll between us, powdered sugar dusting our fingers. She'd talk about her college dreams, about traveling someday, about the kind of life she wanted to build. Those years were quiet, but they were full. When Claire moved out after graduation, the house echoed more than I expected. Still, we talked often. She'd call on her lunch breaks, complaining about her boss or the terrible coffee at her office. I'd send her photos of the garden I kept mostly for her, tomatoes she loved, basil that made the whole backyard smell like summer. We weren't the kind of family that said I love you every 5 minutes, but it was there, in the pauses, in the checking in the comfort of knowing the other was always a phone call away. Then, one Tuesday in October, she didn't answer. I left a voicemail, nothing dramatic, just me saying, "Hey kiddo, just checking in, call me when you can." The next day, still nothing. I sent a text with a photo of a lopsided pumpkin I'd carved on a whim. No reply. A week passed, then 2. At first, I told myself she was busy. Young people get busy. Life happens. I tried not to let the quiet creep too deeply into my chest, but something felt off, like a familiar room suddenly rearranged in the dark. When I finally reached her roommate, a young woman I'd met only once, her voice was hesitant. Claire moved out last month," she said. "I thought you knew." The air seemed to thin around me. "Moved out where?" "I'm not sure. She didn't say." That was the first real crack in the surface of my world. I sent emails. I called. I even drove to her old apartment, standing in the hallway like a fool, listening to someone else's music thumping through the walls where my daughter's laughter used to be. Weeks turned into months. My messages went unanswered. On her birthday, I mailed a card anyway, writing 3 pages of small, careful handwriting, trying to bridge a silence I didn't understand. The card came back unopened. People tell you time heals things, but sometimes time just teaches you how to carry the ache without dropping it. I learned to cook smaller meals. I stopped setting out 2 mugs in the morning. I avoided driving past the park where we used to walk. Friends gently stopped asking about her. Holidays became quieter, heavier. Still, every day, some small part of me waited. And then, 7 years later, the letter sat in front of me like a fragile miracle I didn't quite trust. I slid my finger under the flap and opened it slowly, as if the paper itself might shatter. The first line made my breath catch in my throat. "Dad, I don't know if you'll even want to read this." The room felt suddenly too small, too quiet. My chest tightened, old questions rushing back like water behind a cracked dam. I hadn't read the rest yet, but something in my bones told me this wasn't just an apology or a casual hello. It was an explanation, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what it might take from me, or give back. I cleared my throat and unfolded the letter, the paper slightly rough under my fingers, smelling faintly of printer ink and a hint of lavender, her favorite candle scent, I remembered. My eyes scanned the first paragraph slowly, savoring each word, as though reading too fast might break the fragile connection the letter promised. Dad, I don't know if you'll even want to read this, but I need you to understand why I left, why I stopped answering your calls, your texts, everything. Even just reading that, I felt a lump form in my throat. Every night for 7 years, I had wondered what I had done wrong, replayed every conversation in my head, trying to find the moment I lost her. And now, finally, she was trying to tell me. She went on, I know you think I disappeared out of anger, or because I wanted to hurt you, but it wasn't that simple. I was scared. I felt trapped between what I thought you wanted and what someone else was telling me you wanted, and I didn't know how to fix it without hurting everyone, even you. My hands tightened around the paper. Trapped, I whispered to myself. The word hung in the air like smoke. I thought of all the lonely nights I had spent waiting by the phone, imagining that she had abandoned me for some reason I couldn't control. The thought that someone else had fed her lies I had no way to contradict, hit me like a punch to the chest. She paused in the letter to recount what had really happened. It started when I graduated. I got my first apartment, my first real job, and people started saying things about you, about how you didn't care, or how you never wanted me to succeed without your guidance. I know now it wasn't true. I know you were proud, but at that time, I couldn't tell who to believe, and the last time we spoke, I overheard something someone said, and I thought you were disappointed in me. I felt like I had failed you, and I ran.
I thought running was safer than fighting, safer than disappointing you more. I sank into the chair, the letter resting on my lap, my eyes stinging. I could remember that last phone call, her voice distant, almost fragile. I thought it was teenage dramatics, maybe lingering grief from losing her mother. I had no idea that what I heard in the background that day had been twisted in her mind into proof that I didn't care. It was both heartbreaking and infuriating. I felt a quiet, simmering anger, not at Claire, but at the world that had poisoned her perception, at the people who whispered doubts and lies. And yet there was relief too, like finally exhaling air I hadn't realized I'd been holding for 7 years. Her letter continued, each word measured, careful, painfully honest. I didn't know how to reach you. Every time I tried to call, I froze. Every message I started to write, I erased. I hated myself for leaving you in the dark, but I also needed to survive. And I didn't know how to survive without cutting off everything that reminded me of the world I thought I had failed in. I closed my eyes and let the letter rest on my chest. My apartment, the hum of the fridge, the faint smell of burnt toast from this morning, even the ticking of the clock, all of it felt sharper, more vivid. Memories of her, tiny hands gripping mine in the grocery store, the way she laughed when I tried to dance in the living room, the smell of her hair when I tucked her in, flooded back. I had mourned her absence in a quiet, internal way, imagining scenarios where we had fallen apart irreparably, never guessing that a web of lies had spun itself around her heart. I picked the letter up again and read the final lines. I want to try, Dad. I want to see if we can start over. I know it won't be easy. I know we have years of silence to navigate, but I still love you, and I hope you still love me. My hands shook again. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven. I wanted to scream in relief, to cry in joy, to hold her, to forgive and beg forgiveness all at once. Instead, I just sat there for a long while, letting the quiet room absorb my trembling. After a while, I dialed her number. My fingers hovered over the keys, afraid to press call as though the sound might shatter this fragile bridge we were about to rebuild. Then I remembered every Sunday morning, every shared cinnamon roll, every night of watching her grow into her own person. I pressed call, the phone rang, and then her voice, faint at first, almost shy. Hi, Dad. Hi, kiddo.
I whispered back, my voice breaking. It's me. I've missed you, she said, and I could hear the tremor in her voice, the same one I used to feel when she was scared or uncertain. I've missed you too, I said. The words felt small compared to the 7 years of silence, but they were enough. For now, they were enough. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew we had a lot to talk about, a lot of trust to rebuild, but after 7 years of waiting in the dark, even a small light felt like the sun. That night, I slept with the letter on my nightstand. I smelled the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the paper, and for the first time in years, I felt a little less alone.
And I realized love doesn't always need constant conversation to survive. Sometimes it just needs patience, hope, and a letter that finally tells the truth. The next morning, the sunlight came through the kitchen window in golden streaks, dust motes dancing lazily in the air, and I felt a strange, nervous energy buzzing in my chest. I had imagined this moment for years, the phone call, the letter, the possibility of reconnecting, but imagining and living it were entirely different. Every step toward her felt tentative, like walking on glass barefoot. I made coffee, the bitter aroma filling the kitchen, and for the first time in years, I set out 2 mugs, one for me and one for her, figuratively for now. I picked up my phone and sent her a text. Would you like to meet for lunch this weekend? I'll come wherever is easiest for you. The response came quickly. Yes, I'd like that. Saturday? Saturday felt both impossibly far away and heartbreakingly close. I spent the days leading up to it in quiet preparation, tidying the apartment, even baking her favorite blueberry muffins, though I wasn't sure she would remember. I found myself replaying conversations in my head, trying to anticipate what she might say, what I should say, how to apologize for the years I hadn't known how to reach her. When Saturday came, I drove slowly to the cafe we had chosen, a small, sunlit place near the park where we used to walk together. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and pastries hit me as soon as I opened the door, and then I saw her, sitting at a table by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, staring outside like she was gathering courage from the sunlight. She looked up as I approached. Her hair had grown longer, and there was a quiet strength in her posture that hadn't been there when she was 17. But her eyes were unmistakably hers. They were wide, a little anxious, and flickered with something I hadn't seen in years: recognition, relief, and hope. I swallowed hard. "Hi, Claire," I said, my voice catching. "Hi, Dad," she replied, her own voice soft, almost breaking. We sat. There was a pause, an almost tangible wall between us, but it was a wall that had small cracks now, tiny openings where light could slip through. I don't even know where to start," she said finally, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "Start wherever feels right," I said. "I'm just glad we're here." She exhaled, and I could hear the weight of years leaving her in that single breath. "I blamed myself for so long," she admitted, "and I blamed you too without really knowing the truth. I didn't understand how much lies and gossip could twist reality. I thought you didn't care anymore." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "Oh, kiddo, I cared every day, every single day. I just didn't know how to reach you when you shut the door." Tears slipped from her eyes. I tried to blink mine back, but they came anyway. We sat like that for a while, hands touching, 2 souls bridging a gap that it felt impossible to cross. Over the next hour, we talked about everything: the misunderstandings, the people who had sown lies between us, the loneliness, the fear. We laughed in some places, cried in others. Every word was a brick in a wall we were rebuilding, a wall not of separation, but of connection, understanding, and trust. At one point, she laughed softly, almost shyly, and I realized how much I had missed that sound. "You baked muffins?" she said, nodding toward the paper bag I had brought. I smiled. I wasn't sure you'd remember, but I had to try. Her laughter filled the cafe, warm and tentative, and for the first time in years, it felt like home. After lunch, we walked in the park, side by side, the air crisp with early spring. She talked about her life, the small victories, the challenges, the places she wanted to go, and I listened, really listened, savoring every detail. I realized that the years we lost couldn't be recovered, but the time we had now was ours. We stopped by the bench where we used to sit as she told me about her first heartbreak, the disappointment
resentment she felt at a job that didn't respect her. I told her about my fears, the nights I spent worrying, the silent dinners, the empty chairs. For the first time, there were no unspoken words between us. By the time we parted that afternoon, the sun was low, casting long shadows over the grass. She hugged me tightly, and I could feel the years of distance melt into that single embrace. "I want to come home more often," she said quietly, pulling back just enough to look me in the eye. "You always have a home here, Claire. You always will," I replied. Driving home, I felt an odd mixture of exhaustion and elation. The silence that had haunted my life for so long had been broken, replaced with conversation, laughter, and even shared tears. I knew we had a long road ahead. Rebuilding trust after 7 years of absence wasn't going to be instant, but for the first time, it felt possible. And in that moment, I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it does allow the present to breathe. I got home, placed the letter back on the nightstand, and inhaled deeply. The faint scent of lavender still lingered, and I smiled softly. We had finally found each other again. The weeks after that first meeting were both delicate and extraordinary. We didn't rush anything. Claire and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, cautiously, like planting seeds in soil we weren't sure would bloom again. Some days were filled with laughter and easy conversation, and others were heavy with silence, the shadows of 7 years of absence lingering between us. I learned how much she had grown, not just in years, but in understanding of the world. She had her own routines, her own struggles, a life I had only glimpsed through occasional social media posts, and yet she still wanted me there, still wanted to include me. That, more than anything, felt miraculous. We started with small things. I would leave a note on the counter when I went to work, telling her what I was fixing in the garden or reminding her that her favorite tea was on the shelf. She would respond with texts that made me smile, sometimes simple, like, "Thanks, Dad, saw the basil is thriving." Other times longer, almost confessional, where she shared her feelings, her fears, her triumphs. Slowly, a bridge grew between us again. One afternoon, I went to her apartment to help with a broken faucet. She opened the door, smiling nervously, like a teenager worried she wasn't ready to face me fully. "Thanks for coming, Dad," she said. "No problem," I replied, ducking into the small kitchen. The faucet dripped steadily, a rhythm that matched the cautious beating of my heart. "Show me what's wrong." As we worked, the silence was comfortable, a shared rhythm of turning wrenches and tightening screws. Every so often, she would glance at me, her eyes soft, and I realized that even in mundane tasks, connection could be rebuilt. And then came the day she invited me to a small dinner with her closest friends. I was nervous. Part of me worried about judgment, about awkward questions, about whether I would still feel like a stranger in her life. But as soon as I entered her apartment, the fear melted. Her friends welcomed me warmly, asking about my work, laughing at stories she told about my stubbornness and old habits. She watched me through the room, her expression a mixture of pride and relief, and I understood that this was more than forgiveness. It was acceptance. Still, the world outside our fragile bubble of reconnection was not gone. There were questions from relatives, murmurs from the old neighborhood, even casual acquaintances asking, "Where has Claire been all these years?" I answered politely, carefully, never with anger. I realized that rebuilding trust with her didn't mean I had to fight battles I didn't need to fight publicly. The private reconciliation mattered most. But then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I received a call from an old family friend, someone who had been present during the time Claire first left. They wanted to meet, nervously explaining that they had witnessed the lies that had driven her away. I listened, a knot tightening in my stomach. The truth, finally revealed to me, was that certain acquaintances, people I had considered harmless, even helpful, had sown seeds of doubt in Claire's mind, whispering that I was proud only of achievements, that I expected perfection, that I might not support her dreams. None of it was true, but young Claire, scared and grieving, had believed them. Hearing it confirmed both relief and fury. Relief that I hadn't truly failed her, fury that someone had manipulated her love and trust. But I did not act impulsively. I understood that confronting them wouldn't undo the years lost. Instead, I focused on Claire, on rebuilding our bond, and helping her understand she had nothing to fear from me. Over dinner, dinner that night, I shared the new information with her, cautiously, trying not to overwhelm her. "You weren't wrong to feel hurt," I said, "but you weren't abandoned either. It was lies, not my love, that pushed you away." She sat quietly for a long moment, her eyes glistening. I think I understand now," she whispered. "All those years I blamed myself. I blamed you, and it wasn't either of us at fault." I nodded, feeling the weight of years slowly lifting from both our shoulders. "No, kiddo, life isn't perfect, and sometimes people complicate it with their words. But truth lasts, and it's ours to hold on to now." By the end of the evening, we laughed together more freely than we had in a long time. Old habits returned, the playful teasing, the gentle nudges, the comfort of shared stories. And I realized for the first time in years that healing didn't mean erasing the past. It meant holding the pain lightly, forgiving, and moving forward together.
That night, walking home alone under the streetlights, I felt something I hadn't in years. A sense of hope. Not naive hope, not the fragile kind that shatters at the first disappointment, but steady, rooted hope. Claire and I were rebuilding a life, carefully and deliberately, brick by brick. And though there were still cracks, we would fill them together. I understood now that love, even when tested, even when twisted by lies, can survive. It bends, stretches, and sometimes breaks, but it can also mend, stronger and more resilient than before. The months that followed felt like stepping into a world I had forgotten existed, one full of small joys, quiet triumphs, and ordinary moments made extraordinary because we were together. Claire and I started having regular dinners, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes including her friends, and gradually a few distant family members. We didn't rush, and we didn't pretend that the lost years didn't exist. Instead, we acknowledged them, gently, as part of our story, a story we were still writing together. One afternoon, I found myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables while Claire hummed softly at the counter. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the apartment, and I realized how comforting this felt. The simple act of cooking, of existing together in the same space, without past hurt looming over us. "Dad," she said suddenly, "I've been thinking." I looked up, knife in hand. "I want to invite you to my art show next month. It's small, local, but it means a lot to me. I want you there." I smiled, a warm, full smile I hadn't felt in years. I wouldn't miss it for the world. It struck me then how much I had taken for granted, even when she was just a phone call away. The little things, her laughter, her ideas, her presence, were treasures. And now, after 7 years, I had the chance to cherish them in person again. As the day of her show arrived, I stood in the gallery, watching Claire move gracefully among her friends, discussing her work, her voice steady, confident. I felt a swell of pride, not just for her talent, but for her courage. She had faced the fear and confusion that had pushed her away, and she had come back. She had chosen connection over isolation. Later, as we walked home together under the soft glow of streetlights, she slipped her hand into mine, a small, deliberate gesture, yet it carried all the weight of 7 years of absence. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for waiting, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." I squeezed her hand. "No, kiddo, thank you for trusting me now, for giving us another chance." I thought back to the first day I opened her letter, the tremor in my hands, the fear, the heartbreak, how fragile it had all seemed. And now, the fragile had become sturdy. The hurt had transformed into understanding. The silence had become conversation. We still had hard days. Misunderstandings didn't vanish overnight, and old fears occasionally crept in, but each challenge was met with dialogue, honesty, and patience. And slowly, the gaps between us, the years of distance, were filled with moments of presence, small rituals, shared memories, and laughter. One evening, as I tucked the letter back into its envelope and placed it on the shelf, I realized something profound. That letter was more than just an explanation. It was a bridge. It had carried us from years of pain into a space where healing was possible. And it reminded me that even when communication fails, love doesn't always end. It waits, sometimes patiently, sometimes quietly, for the moment it can speak again. I often think back to the moment I first saw her, sitting at the cafe, hands wrapped around that cup of tea, the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty, and yet the longing to reconnect.
It was a delicate balance, a test of patience, of trust, and when she finally spoke, when the walls came down just a little, I realized something essential. It's never too late to mend what was broken as long as there is willingness on both sides. Healing, I have learned, is not a dramatic revelation or a single act of forgiveness. It is the accumulation of small, steady choices to listen, to show up, to believe in each other despite fear and misunderstanding. It is the quiet courage of a daughter writing a letter after years of silence and a father finally learning how to hold her again. And now, when I see Claire, when I hear her laugh, when she hugs me unexpectedly, I understand that the years of hurt are not erased. They are woven into our bond, making it stronger, more resilient. We are two people who have survived absence, misunderstanding, and fear, and have chosen each other again. As I sit here writing this, I wonder how many bridges are waiting to be crossed in silence if only someone had the courage to reach out. How many truths remain unspoken, leaving love to wait. Would you have waited as I did, or would you have given up? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes sharing our stories is the first step to reconnecting, the first step to healing. And if you are holding on to silence, whether you are the parent or the child, I want you to remember this. A single letter, a single phone call, a single honest word can change everything. It can reopen doors, mend hearts, and restore the bond you thought was lost forever. Claire and I are still writing our story every day, and for the first time in 7 years, it is full of hope, presence, and the quiet certainty that love can survive even the longest silence.